Hello, Dr. Dan. I completed my Teachers in Action hours in Osceola County at Eastlake Elementary School. I worked with a summer school class of third graders who were set to be retained. In this class were multiple documented cases of ADHD and one student with ODD. Prior to this class, I had very little experience working with students where I was aware of a documented case of ADHD or ODD. I had this expectation that the students with these designations were disruptive and constantly off task. What I experienced, however, was much different. I focused in on one student that had both designations of ADHD and ODD. During my time in there, the teacher spent a lot of time in whole group. I monitored him during that time, and I noticed that he was almost always on task. He was agreeable. He seemed to always be paying attention. There were times when he would seem to be looking off in the distance, but she would give a direction and he would follow it at once. I checked on his work as he was completing it in whole group, and the answers he was giving were correct in most cases. I also noticed that all the time that he was sitting there, he was constantly fidgeting. He was moving his legs, his pencil, tapping his fingers, and such. During this time, I noticed another student who did not have the designation of ADHD or ODD, but exhibited some of those behaviors. I wondered if he had just gone untested and perhaps would be better suited with those designations and his ability to receive more appropriate instruction. After the teacher had completed her whole group instruction, we moved to small group, and I worked with a few students, but I mainly want to focus on the student with the ADHD and ODD designations. During my time with him, I realized that he was really behind. He maybe was on a first grade level in reading and struggled with decoding simple words. The teacher had given us a printout of some words word families that she wanted us to take a look at, and there was a picture of a whale at the top, and he was very concerned with coloring that whale during our time together. And I found it very difficult to bring him back on task and to try to refocus him towards the task at hand. I had an opportunity to review the 504 plan for the student with the ADHD and ODD designations. It was interesting to be able to see how these accommodations are put into place for these students, rather than in these hypothetical situations we get in our classes. For example, the student is to be seated near positive role models who can aid him with his work. The teacher makes changes to a presentation that makes it more accessible for these students who are taken off task a little easier than others. For his assignments, he's given extra time, and the workload is broken into smaller segments. He's given extra time in test taking, up to 50% additional time. Also, there's the idea that the teacher can offer verbal encouragement. Then you can develop a reward system for completion of class and homework. And then you have the agenda for communication with the family. And then the behavior was the part that I thought was most interesting, because it says that you need to allow some of the behaviors that students with these designations often exhibit. For example, legitimate movement. We can't be constantly telling our kids, stop moving. You can't be moving, when they really just need to get it out of them. I wanted to include one of the work samples from my friend here. This is that word family list that I was telling you about before, and you'll see that he was very into coloring him, and really more so than any of the words on the page. It was quite difficult for me, having little experience in this field, with drawing his attention back to the page and getting him to try to work with me. This was a great experience for me, as I really didn't truly know what to expect from these students. I had this very ignorant view of what a student with ADHD or ODD would act like. I was the thing I was most surprised about was his lack of behaviors that would make you think he was ODD. I did a little bit of research afterwards, and I've seen that some of the more mild cases are only brought out in, with different interactions with different people. So perhaps with his family, he's more defiant and such. And as I said before, one of the only real signs that I saw that I would think he may have that ADHD is his constant fidgeting. So I was wondering if there was something as a teacher we could do to just kind of ease that for him, to give him an outlet for that. And my wife is a media specialist, and she was able to get all these really cool stools. They're called hockey stools, and it kind of gives you that yoga ball experience where you can kind of sit on it and rock back and forth and move around without distracting the people around you. And then one of the other very beneficial parts of this experience for me was seeing that the ways in which these accommodations are put into place in the classroom. The way the teacher had chosen to arrange him with students who were, positive role models for him, and how she would just allow him to make those movements that he really couldn't help, rather than calling attention to him, just let him do his thing.